we're actually very lucky in having not only someone to welcome us who's very, very well positioned to welcome us to this really very wonderful venue, but also someone who's had 20 years in CCS, as long as Carbon Capture and Storage Centre has been going. And I have to say, I think, you know, a few times, maybe the first time I met Julia, she said, we were sort of talking about CCS, and she said, so what about tea? And I said, well, what about tea? You know, I drink coffee, I don't drink tea. She said, no, what about the silent tea in CCS? And what do you mean? She said, transport. So nothing happens without carbon capture, transport and storage. And I think Julia's been working for 20 years on trying to get it there. And I have to say, Julia, I think it's actually less appropriate to have the U in CCUS than not to have the T, but perhaps we can work on that. So without more ado, I'll pass you on to Julia Race to introduce you to University of Strathclyde and provide a proper welcome.
How do I make it? All right. Okay, so it is with great pleasure that I'd like to introduce you to the University of Strathclyde. As John said, my name's Julia Race, and I'm one of the Vice Deans in the Faculty of Engineering. So on behalf of the Dean, welcome. As John also says, I'm a CCS veteran. Obviously, I started on this when I was 18 and have carried on for the next 20 years. Not. Firstly, Falsha Gualba, welcome to Scotland. For those of you who've never been to Scotland, what we say 1,000 welcomes to Scotland. You can probably tell from my accent, I'm an adopted Scot. I moved here in 2014 when I moved to Strathclyde from Newcastle University. But that has been a very good move for me. Scotland has a population of about 5.5 million people. 70% of them live in what we call the Central Belt, which is the waste, if you like, of Scotland. I don't know if I can, does that move on there? Yeah. Which is this part here between Glasgow and Edinburgh, which is the basins of the River Forth and the River Clyde. So 70% of our activity and our people live in that area. That's going to become a little bit significant later on. That does mean there is a lot of space left and a lot of beautiful space left. So if this is your first trip to Scotland, and even if it's not, I would really encourage you to have a look around. And we've got fantastic castles, fantastic beaches, mountains, and my favourite are the golf courses. You can't go very far in Scotland without tripping over a golf course. And if you ever see my out of office that says I'm on a course, you'll know exactly what sort of course that is. Also, welcome to Glasgow, and a particular welcome to Glasgow. The Gaelic for Glasgow means green hollow or green glen, and it's sometimes known as the dear green place. And you might have an impression of what Glasgow is like. We have a very proud and rich industrial past, particularly shipbuilding on the Clyde. But we're also a very green and beautiful city. And these are some of my snaps of Glasgow, and these were all taken within 2 miles of where we are now. We also like to draw on the walls, so we have very beautiful murals. The one you can see there is literally over the street, and there is a mural trail. You can go and you can look at our graffiti, and I would again encourage you to go and do that. So take some time to look around you whilst you're here. And my advice to any person doing a tour of Glasgow is always to look up. There is some beautiful, beautiful architecture in Glasgow. So welcome to Glasgow. And finally, welcome to Strathclyde. The University of Strathclyde, I'll go into its history in a little bit, but we are a leading international technological university, which means that we don't have a medical school here. We're one of 3 universities in Glasgow, Glasgow University, Strathclyde, and then Glasgow Caledonian. So and we all are within, again, about 2 miles of each other. We were founded in the time of the Scottish Enlightenment. I'll go into that in a little bit, but everywhere you go here, you'll see our sort of motto, that we are the place of useful learning. And again, we like to write that on the walls. So you will see this mural. It used to be right opposite the TIC building. And we have a socially progressive agenda, and you can see our mission statement there. What I want to do, though, during this introduction is also give you an introduction, as John said, to what we've been doing, certainly in the university, but very much to concentrate on what we've been doing in energy and CCS. And also to give you a very personal perspective and maybe give you an encouraging message as you start out on this conference. So we were founded, like I said, by a guy called John Anderson in 1796. And he bequeathed money because he wanted to make a place of useful learning, to encourage that the courses that were taught here had some impact in society. He also wanted to make a place that was accessible for people who wouldn't normally have a university education. So those who maybe were more from socially deprived areas or women. So in that way was very progressive. The university then went through some changes, became known as the Anderson's University, and then the West of Scotland Technical College. It's subsumed in some of the business, Anderson's Faculty of Business, until we got to the 20th century and we got our Royal Charter in 1964 and we became the University of Strathclyde. But we very much kept Anderson's original strategy in founding the university, in saying that this is somewhere that should be a place of useful learning and also have an agenda that is socially progressive in terms of diversification of education. You can also see some of the prizes that we have won along the way. But CCSRC and its other incarnations have been here before. And the last time that you were here was in 2015. So when I said I wanted to give you a personal perspective of what has happened since 2015, and I want to start by sort of thinking about what we've done as a university. So since you were last here in Glasgow, so over the last 20 years, we have been organising ourselves into some strategic themes. We have 7 strategic themes: advanced manufacturing and materials, energy, health and well-being, innovation and entrepreneurship, measurement, digital and enabling technologies, ocean, air and space, and people, place and policy. Now, for us, I'm going to have highlighted on this slide the things that have, or we've been working on around the energy theme, particularly related to net zero and CCS, advanced manufacturing and people, place and policy. So since you were here, just after you came, we formed the Advanced Nuclear Research Centre. So that centre has a research portfolio looking at nuclear research and particularly plant lifetime extension, asset management, decommissioning and the likes. long after that, and have just celebrated their anniversary, was 10-year anniversary, was the Centre for Energy Policy, which is directed by Professor Karen Turner, who you'll hear from after the break. Now, for me, that was a particularly interesting collaboration, and I think some of the so very much I'm a technical researcher, but taking in things like policy and people and making that part of the research for me was very important at that time. In 2019, we established, or we didn't establish, the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland was established, and it's run by the University of Strathclyde, and it's out near the airport. If you ever fly into Glasgow and you look down, you'll see a bright purple building, and that is NMIS. And what NMIS are doing, they've incorporated our Advanced Forming Research Centre and Lightweight Manufacturing Centre. And what they're doing is focusing on manufacturing to support net zero goals, but also ensuring that we have the skilled workforce in place to be able to do that. You can also see things that we did around supporting our sustainable development goals, particularly in our research and teaching. And then in 2021, COP came to Glasgow. I've put it here, not that we brought COP to Glasgow, but I just put it here because it was a big thing for the city to have COP come to Glasgow, which resulted in the Glasgow Climate Pact, as you probably are aware. I mentioned that in 1964, we got our Royal Charter. So that meant that last year we were able to celebrate our Diamond Jubilee. And we did that by relaunching our Vision 2030. So that reset our goals and our vision and our mission around what are our core values. So the core values of Strathclyde are people-orientated, bold, innovative, collaborative and ambitious. And again, that you will see those values writ large in the university. So what else has happened since you were last here? So that is what has happened around the things that we are interested in during this meeting. But also since you were last here. So I think you came in about March, and just after you were here, the deck competition was cancelled. And that's the SSAE Peterhead and the White Rose projects. And I said I was going to give you a very personal perspective. So I was involved with what was then National Grid Carbon in the White Rose project, looking at the pipeline transport. And almost overnight, National Grid Carbon was closed. And that was kind of, oh, well, this is, it seems to be something that's happened again. And I want to refer back to the previous competition, which was part of the Longannet project. And I was involved in the Longannet project as well, looking at repurposing a pipeline called Feeder 10, which goes from Grangemouth, or just near to Grangemouth, between Edinburgh and Glasgow, up to Peterhead and St Fergus. And that competition was cancelled. So I kind of think, okay, well, 2015, we knew that we could do all of the bits. We knew we could do the capture, we knew that we could do the transport, we knew that we could do the storage. So what happened in that? And that's when, as I said, I started working with the Centre for Energy Policy, and we started thinking, well, what happened? What happened then? Because you can get very kind of there's outside influences that affect what you're doing. But I think one of the important messages that I want to say, and it's getting a bit of a downer, but I don't mean it to be that, is that what we did was we kept researching. And I think that's what everybody here did to get us to the position where we are now. I've also put some other things on there just to remind you of, oh, did that happen and how long was that? And so in mid-2016, we had the Brexit referendum since you were here, and we had a global pandemic, which started, as you can see, March 2020 and officially finished in March 2023. But look what happened in between those dates. So the 10-point plan for Green Industrial Revolution was published. The Track 1 Phase 1 competition was announced, and the Track 1 Phase 2. And just after the pandemic was officially over, the Track 2 projects were announced. So I think that is something that says, but we still kept going. We still kept thinking that this was an important thing on the agenda. And whereas the Longannet project that I talked about and the White Rose project were very much source to sink, now what people were thinking about was industrial clusters and how things could cluster together, or industries could cluster together. And that became a very important way of thinking about that. And you're going to hear a lot more about that from people better qualified to talk to it. But one of the things that came out of that Track 2 project is something called the Acorn project, which was selected as part of Track 2. Again, I'm not going to talk about Acorn, but I did really want to give you a very Scottish perspective as you're sitting in Scotland about what is happening in Scotland and what is happening around industrial centres. And then finally, in mid-2024, the Scott Connect project funding was announced, which is going to connect Grangemouth. I remember I said that most of our people and most of our industrial activity is in that central belt, which means somehow we have to get the emissions from that central belt up to where we can then send them offshore, so up to St Fergus and around the Peterhead area in Aberdeen. So if you think where I started and where we've finished up here on this timeline, we're kind of getting to the same place. And I think that is good, because what that's saying is the research that we were doing previously is being used. And that's one of the messages that I wanted to give as we start off on this couple of days meeting. What I did was to just trying to look at that was to say, well, okay, what happened in terms of publications? So what I've done here is it's very crude analysis. So I looked for on the Web of Science publications, research article publications on CCUS, using a number of CCUS keywords. So as I said, it's not exhaustive, but it does show a pattern. So when I started in CCS 2005, there weren't many people researching in this area, but the number of publications gradually increased. You can see a little lag there around where just economics changed, government priorities changed, that worldwide. So you see there's a drop, but then we kept on researching. And then as we've got more momentum, it's kind of started to rise up again. So I guess that was one of my main things that I wanted to encourage you at the start of this meeting is the impetus in CCS and the research that we need is increasing, and it's fantastic to see, considering where we started 20 years ago. So what do we do in CCS at Strathclyde? This is going to be a very whistle-stop tour, and I'm grateful to Jen for some of the slides that I'm going to present here. But what I want to say is that at Strathclyde, we cover the full chain from capture, transport and storage, and also look at policy and economics in that. So I'm going to show you some slides with some very smiley people on them. I've realized as I've played these slides that everybody's smiling, so that's good to see. And so that you know, if you say, oh, that I'm really interested in finding out about that you know who to go and ask. So I'm going to start with geological storage. So there are a number of research areas around geological storage. Firstly, around engineered barriers, and you can see my colleagues who work in this area around things like microbial-induced calcite precipitation. But also in the area of storage, we also look at things like CO2 fluid flow through rocks and understanding those sorts of interactions, and also looking at injectivity. And we also, in storage, look at some monitoring technologies and smart sensors. We also look at where infrastructure is sited, and you can see that that's not only the storage infrastructure, but also the pipeline and transport infrastructure around there, and particularly looking at reuse of that infrastructure for CCS. In terms of capture, we have colleagues in both civil engineering and our chemical process engineering departments looking at membraneless direct air capture, eutectic solvents, biochars, and minerals. So another thing I want to say is we do a lot of our CCS research across 3 faculties and a number of different departments, often in collaboration. In terms of the transport, which is my area, so I'll just spend a few hours on this slide. So in terms of transport, we look at both pipeline transport and ship transport. My home department is the Department of Naval Architecture, Ocean and Marine Engineering. So we're looking at pipeline transport, but also either transporting CO2 by ship or retrofitting ships to capture the CO2 on board and through a project called Green Marine. And then finally, in terms of the research that we're doing around economics and policy, I mentioned my colleagues here from the Centre for Energy Policy, and we've been working since for the last 10 years on economic and social impacts of CCS and looking at that from a whole economy perspective. So why should we do CCS is the question that we ask. And then we've got people in our business school looking at international carbon policy. I have got some slides on some particular projects that if you're interested in, the Uptake project, which Jen is leading from Strathclyde. And we also have a project called Green Marine, which is the ship-based CO2 capture, which is being led by one of my colleagues in naval architecture, looking at how we can capture CO2 from ships. And the other one I wanted to pick out was another one that Jen and a colleague, Pauline, are leading, which is looking at the skills and supply chain for CCS. So I guess thinking that we all need to do this in the whole, in terms of the technical capture, transport, storage, but then the economic ecosystem, the policy ecosystem, and the people that are around that. So I hope that gives you a flavour of who we are at Strathclyde, what we stand for, and what sort of energy and CCS research we've been doing, certainly over the last 10 years since you were here. So I want to end with this. So what of the future and what of the future, particularly in Scotland? I've taken this picture from a report on capturing the economic potential. And I've put this here because this report contains is based on work that we did at the Centre for Energy Policy with Christian, who's sitting up there. And we were looking at particularly the Scottish CO2 transport and storage industry. So we managed to get the T in the TNS and looking about how that can be devolved and invested in. So that was work that we started in 2016 after the end of the last competition. And it's looking at the CO2, the Scott Connect pipeline up to Acorn at Peterhead and then off to the GoldenEye project. There's recently, last week, been published a report called Project Willow, which is looking at the future for Grangemouth. Grangemouth sits here, so I guess right in the central belt where the majority of our emissions are. And it's looking at what will be the feasibility for that area following the recent decision by Petroineos to decommission the oil refinery, and looking at how industry could be attracted to that area, and then how the emissions can be removed on the pipeline that goes from Grangemouth to Peterhead. Very similar to the pipeline that I looked at in 2011 that was going from Longannet, which is almost where that little blue triangle is outside Grangemouth, up to Peterhead. So I guess what I want to say is that what I've noticed over my 20 years is that you never know when your research is going to come back and is going to be used. And I am very encouraged at this point to see that all the work that has been done, all the building blocks that have been built have got us to this position now where you saw on that timeline an increase, a ramp up in activity around CCS. And I am more confident that we're going to realise something from this, because I think we have to. And the last thing I want to say is to end with a Scots expression, which is haste ye back. So please don't leave it another 10 years to come back and see us. And please look out for the exciting things that are happening around Scotland in CCS. That was all I wanted to say. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Julia. That takes us back to some interesting times. Another connection, perhaps, to some interesting times is our next speaker, Jeremy Carey, who's the outgoing chair of the UKCCSRC board, and he'll also make some introductions. And Jeremy, I think I first came across when he was at SSE and handling research and dealing with a project at Ferrybridge for 100-ton-a-day pilot plant, and then at Peterhead on the capture project, and then consulting in 42 Technology in his own company. And I think Jeremy joined UKCCSRC in 2015, but very soon we had the end of the second CCS competition and dark times, as Julia described. But Jeremy in particular was a driving force behind pointing out that CCS was still needed. The UKCCSRC ran a program looking at clusters, and over that period, since then, we've seen that the cluster concept has been expanded until it's what we're actually doing now. And one of the other things Jeremy did at that time, which was new for me, was introducing an alternative concept to technology readiness levels, so the commercial readiness index. And that was, I think, well ahead of the time, because we didn't have anything that was progressing through commercial readiness index. But I don't know if you'll say anything about it now, but it's really a very important way of thinking about technologies. Once you actually get something out there, you've only just started the research. And I think Jeremy certainly said to me, you never finish R&D until the last actual example of that technology ceases in service, particularly if you've got something, and this is another term that Jeremy introduced me to, if you've got something with a very slow clock rate. So you have very long-lived projects, they turn over slowly, and you also improve them in service. So Jeremy's been a tremendous asset to the UKCCSRC. He's really helped us through some difficult times and challenges, and I think he'll carry on doing that. But anyway, I'll pass the floor over to you, Jeremy, and you can actually say what you really want to say. But I'll just say thank you very much for everything, and we'll repeat that a few times.
Thanks, John. So actually, all I'm going to say at this moment is very little, because I'm going to, I can work out how to advance these slides. what I'm actually going to do in this little slot here is I'm just going to introduce the new chair of the UKCCSRC, Bryony Livesey, who I'm sure many of you know extremely well. She's got an extremely long pedigree in this space. Has been working on it since, well, probably since before me, I think at least. But the way I know Bryony best is I worked for Bryony as a contractor when Bryony was working with Innovate UK, and over the last few years I've done a lot of work with Innovate UK. And as I say about Innovate UK, it's a bit like democracy. You know, it's a terrible system, but it is better than the alternatives. And Innovate UK is a frustrating place to sometimes to do things, but it's a good way of doing it. And Bryony was in charge of delivering the industrial cluster decarbonisation projects, which was not the entirety of the UK cluster programme, but a big chunk of it. There was, you know, whatever the total budget was, over 100 million. I forget the exact number. It was a big number of funding pushed into the UK clusters to help them get going, help them get seeded. And Bryony, if you like, was there fighting the Innovate UK process, propping up what was going on. And she had to fight her way through that's not the way we do these things discussions, I suspect, almost every week, because Innovate UK is set up as an organisation that assumes tacitly that all projects are about £500,000, have got 3 participants, and you're going to design, build and test something inside of 12 months, which is not what the decarbonisation clusters were trying to do. She also had to fight against the fact that DESNZ, as a government department, has a single year spending budget. So they had to spend a certain amount of money by the end of March, and spending money on the 31st of March versus the 1st of April means the world of difference in government budgets. And I won't tell you what Bryony did, the wheezes she pulled to try and sort that out, but they were significant, right? They were legal, but they were absolutely pushing the limits of what the organizations could do, and that required a tremendous amount of character to pull that off. And the other thing she had to do was fight the projects, who the projects, of course, were, you know, we've secured these Innovate UK grants, and that's all very lovely, but what we actually want to do is get to FID. And so the projects were much more focused on their cluster sequencing bids, which was launched, as Julia just pointed out, basically at the same time that Bryony was trying to push this money through. So the projects were going, well, until we're selected for track 1, we don't really want to do anything. And if you put us in track 2, then why were we spending this money? And the answer is, well, because you have to spend this money now, because DESNZ has only got the money now. They won't have it next year. So you've got to get on with it. And again, Bryony was there propping that up. So she's a tremendous operator. She can make things happen that I've never seen happen before or since in Innovate UK circles. And I think she's going to be a tremendous asset to UKCCSRC. And Bryony, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. After such an amazing introduction, I feel I can only disappoint everybody in the room now, but I will do my best to live up to it. It's a tremendous privilege to take over from Jeremy as chairing this amazing organisation. You know, those of you who are not involved in the sort of administration, the detail of what goes on, won't see, you know, the impact of the board on everything that happens in this room. And of course, you know, Jeremy's influence on the board and, you know, some of the things the centre has chosen to focus on and the way it goes about doing things has impressed me for a very long time. So thank you very much, Jeremy, for all you've done. So I'm here today as the new chair of the UKCCSRC board. And I am really looking forward to taking on that role. But what I wanted to do today was to talk about the work I've been involved with most recently, which was leading the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge programme, which finished last year. So I've awarded myself the title of the former director of the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, and the reason why it's former director is we finished the programme on time, which was amazing, involving contributions from absolute loads of people, some of whom are in the room today. So I'm going to tell you a bit about this programme, why we did it, why it was important, and why it matters that we carry on with the lessons that we've learned from that programme and make sure that we move forward in the right way. So first of all, a reminder, just in case anybody needs it, that we're doing this for a reason. We have to reduce our industrial emissions dramatically as part of the programme of the UK and the world getting to net zero emissions. We know industrial emissions are important. We also know that they, in the UK, are concentrated in 6 industrial clusters. Half of our emissions are in those regions. So if we can show that we can decarbonise those, that makes a big difference. And so that is really why the programme was set up. Now, we felt that if we looked at industrial cluster decarbonisation, we would do more than just decarbonise the industries. We'd achieve more things. And we set out a number of benefits that we thought would accrue. And by the time we got to the end of the programme, we were able to refine those statements and confirm that, broadly speaking, this is stuff that we can achieve, or through delivering this programme, we can achieve a whole load of stuff. So we meet our net zero targets. That's absolutely crucial. If you can't do that, not much point carrying on. But we can also drive clean growth and investment into the regions where we're doing the decarbonisation. We think businesses will want to move there, and we're starting to see those conversations happening. We protect the jobs in these critical industrial regions of the UK. We cannot afford for them all to close down. If we can't decarbonise the industries, the jobs will go. It's simple as that. So we're preventing that from happening. We enhance the energy security of the UK for various reasons I'm sure we'll be discussing shortly. And we help our supply chains to find a path through to what is going to be a growing and big opportunity for UK business. And because it's a big opportunity for UK business, we see this as having international impacts as well. And what we've shown through the programme is that all of this can happen, and we need to make sure we don't lose that opportunity. So we set up the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge. It was delivered through UK Research and Innovation. It was launched in 2019. We had 3 key objectives, but were written down in sort of objective speak. But what they basically mean is that we wanted to do the designs and demonstration of technology at industry scale. This was not a pilot program. It was about doing it for real. And we wanted to develop credible, investable plans for each region in which these projects were going to sit. We didn't want the projects to sit there on their own as a project not connected to all the other people that need to use that industry, because that would have been a huge opportunity lost. And so setting up those plans has been an absolute crucial part of the programme. And then we wanted to advance research in themes of key importance for decarbonisation. So that was the goal. You can't deliver that through technology alone. You know, we heard from Julia already, you know, that things happen around you. And we had to ensure that the things happening around us were the right sorts of things, and that we had got the landscape of politics moving in the right direction. So when we started out, government had announced the industrial cluster's mission and the idea of the world's first net zero carbon industrial cluster being here in the UK by 2040. And that was a great ambition, but it wasn't enough to deliver us, you know, industrial decarbonisation on a major scale. And so what we've been doing over this extended period is, through the programme, being able to give government confidence that this is really deliverable on the timescales that we set out for ourselves. And then, through that increased government confidence, share that with the projects that actually policy was moving in the right direction. It was all going to work out, and that we would eventually get to the point of projects actually being initially announcing 20 billion in the government budget of 2023, and then the fabulous news of the first financial close for one of these big projects in December last year, which is a huge milestone for the UK, and all in line with what we had hoped to see when we kicked off the programme in 2014. So this is what we did. We spent way more than Jeremy thought we'd spent. So perhaps you don't think it was such good value for money now, Jeremy. I don't know. But £210 million of public money went into this programme. And of course, that funding is much more than matched by the industry contribution. So it was about 500 million in total. We spent most of it on big projects. Obviously, you know, anyone who's involved in this world knows you can't buy much actual project for 172 million, but you can do a lot of engineering, design, study work to take those projects forward, and that's what we did. And then we had our cluster plans, these crucial plans for decarbonising each region. And then we had our industrial decarbonisation research and innovation centre. So I'll take you through each of these just briefly. So in the deployment projects, these are situated all in the major clusters of the UK. They are basically designed to de-risk the project to go forward so that it can attract the massive investment that it needs to actually move into construction. We're talking about billions of pounds of investment. And we've also focused on the infrastructure that's needed in each region. So the pipelines, where is the storage going to be for the CO2? What other decarbonisation options other than CCS are going to be pursued in parallel? What can we do about hydrogen and so on? And we've developed a real understanding of the commonalities and differences of the projects in the portfolio. And we've reported on all of that in a report you can catch online and read the details of them. And in the session after the break, you're going to be hearing in detail about one of those projects. That should be quite exciting to hear. So that was all very successful. We also delivered our cluster plans. Lots and lots of people have been involved in these. You know, hundreds of people in each region gathered together to produce these plans. They came from industry, they came from many different organisations, local authorities, consulting companies, lots of different sorts of people came together to talk about what they wanted the plan for the region to look like and what was credible. And so now we've got is people in regions who actually think we can do this, and that is really important for getting your project underway and successful. And we put together a document that takes all the lessons from that programme as well and puts it all together in another report, which I'd urge you to have a look at. Because it talks not only about the technical barriers to progress, it talks a lot about the economic barriers that we need to come, but also the social impacts of these projects on communities, which are really very important. The projects all sit in a region of people who want work and good jobs and people who are excited about these projects going forward, and how we harness that is something really crucial for the future. And then we had our Research and Innovation Centre. Many of you will know about the work that it's been doing and perhaps been involved in it. And you can look on their website for the details of the projects that have been delivered around policy and technology development. So that has all been really good. And in terms of what it looks like, this is the map of the UK now with the projects all around it. So industrial carbon capture projects, pipelines, subsea storage opportunities. We've got the onshore pipelines, a massive undertaking around low carbon power in many of these regions. So in some cases, the power element of the project wasn't part of our programme, but because the programme's happening, then power station decarbonisation projects are kicking off all around the clusters in the UK. And of course, these are major opportunities for decarbonising gas-fired power to industry. So that has all been exciting. We were set a target at the start of the programme. This was if you don't raise £261 million of industry to match the government funding, possibly you will get sacked for me. And I was always really nervous about whether we could reach this. But we just went so far beyond matching that target, which was seen as really difficult, the outcome of the programme. It's because industry has really stepped up. And by the time the programme had finished, we'd realised co-investment for industry of almost £1 billion. And the forecast that industry put together, not us, is that we will get to about 22 billion by the end of this decade. That's because these are, when they kick off, really huge projects. And also they incentivize lots of huge projects to kick off around them. So that's how this thing kind of grows and grows. And you could read more detail about that in another report. And then, you know, we set off hoping we were going to deliver a load of stuff. So we, at the end of the program, the projects told us, and we had it independently checked, that we were on track to have 40 million tonnes of CO2 capture capacity by the end of the decade, 1.3 gigawatts of low carbon hydrogen possible. And we're on track to have 5 net zero industrial clusters by 2040. So I did say at the beginning, the government policy is to have one such net zero industrial cluster in place by 2040. But the exciting thing is that all of the clusters that came together to produce their plans put their hands up and said, we want to be it, we think we can be this one. So they will all be competing to really lead the world in decarbonising their regions, which is really exciting to see. So that was the programme. We finished on time. We delivered a lot. We learned an awful lot. And as Jeremy sort of hinted, it was quite difficult to actually deliver all of this stuff, and involved a lot of people coming together to make that happen. So of course, you know, all me and my team and the government people involved. Then we have all the project people, and we have lots and lots of people who need to be involved. You know, there's lots and lots of people in, for example, local authorities who know about carbon capture now, and they didn't used to see that as part of their remit at all. But now they know that, you know, in their region, a big project is coming and they need to plan for that, and they're getting excited, I hope. So I'm just going to move on to you know, some of the lessons we've learned and what we need to see happening next. So I guess the point is we made a lot of progress, and we should be proud of that. You know, we've done some great things in the UK, but there's quite a long way to go. And what we see is that as we move to projects actually kicking off, it's actually exciting to see that momentum, but it's also easy to just focus on individual projects and lose the fact that these projects were supposed to be part of major industrial decarbonising clusters, and how are we going to make all of that happen as well at the same time? It's a complicated thing to do, and it involves a lot of interaction between people, and people being really willing to step up and collaborate, I think, which is the absolutely key thing. So we have made progress. The deployment projects are on track for the UK to be able to meet most of its 2030 and 2040 goals. And we are on track to have the number of, you know, industrial clusters in place that we had hoped to have at the start of the programme, and that is all fantastic. And we've done more research, and we've learned about collaboration and knowledge sharing. One of the things we have learned is we have to do that. If you don't collaborate, you don't tell people what you know, your project is not going to be as successful in isolation. And we've really tried to spread this message throughout the programme, encourage people to collaborate and share. We, of course, don't get to the level of collaboration and sharing as we hoped, but I do believe it's been a lot more than it would have been if we hadn't put that at the heart of the programme. And we've seen a lot of projects talking to each other, sharing things that went well for them and things that didn't go so well, and that's been great to see. So in terms of things we've learned and done, then we have done things like you know, how to do this, and how to really think about what we can contribute to implementing and developing the UK's national strategies. So we have seen that, you know, as the national strategy has developed, we've seen that project leaders and project delivery companies see that as something that they can contribute to actually doing, rather than it just sitting there as a government strategy that no one really expects to implement. And I think that's been really good. We've seen the importance of collaboration. So people have set up agreements. Having formal collaboration agreements in place can be really helpful, because it helps you to share information that would normally be confidential. And we've seen that people sometimes set up collaboration agreements that weren't quite fit for purpose. They ended up with far too many partners and needing to communicate with too many people. So we learned a lot about how to do that and how to make those flexible so that people can come in and leave as they like. And all that's been really, really good. And we've also started to see the beginnings of implementation, which is, of course, where most of the major learnings of this program are going to come from. This is when the real technical challenges actually start to arise, the commercial challenges, regulatory, communications with the public, all of these things we've been preparing for as well as we can. But of course, when the real projects kick off, that's a whole new world. We saw a lot of projects talking about difficulties they'd face in getting planning consents or permits for their projects, and that it took a long time. And so one of the things we've been able to do is put that consensus of experience together to suggest we need to really think about how we do this better. And we've also learned about the importance of budgeting flexibly to manage costs of these projects being delivered. A difficult time for everybody. Costs of lots of things have gone through the roof. And it's been some difficult conversations with government, I can imagine, on how these projects are going to cost more than was originally imagined. And we have to be really kind of grown up about that sort of messaging, I think. And then we also have to think about how to deal with investors. These are multi-billion-pound projects. So you're not just talking about technical aspects, you're trying to work with your boards and work with investors to get the projects through. And I'm sure we'll be hearing much more about that shortly. And we've learned about how to engage with communities. Some projects are better at it than others and put in more effort. If you put in more effort, you get a lot back. We are starting to see people really engaged in these projects, looking forward to them actually happening and starting to plan for development of skills in their regions. For example, they know the projects are coming. They know this is a real opportunity for young people or experienced people to retrain. And those sort of conversations are going on all around the UK now. So finally, what do we need? So we still need lots. We haven't delivered the project yet. We've delivered this program, which was intended to kickstart the projects and make sure they could survive and thrive. And I think that's gone very well. But there is much still needed. And out of our program, we made a number of recommendations, things that we really needed to focus on. So one of those things is the market signals. People need confidence of the direction we're going in, and that is something that matters a lot. I think when we kicked off this program, there was no government policy to support anybody investing in this program getting any of their money back. Industry put up the initial £261 million across the whole of the industry in the UK with no confidence at all that they get anything back ever. But, as the signals increase, it creates the confidence and people move forward. And I think that's something that we have managed to do quite well in the UK, of signalling that people can, with confidence, move to the next step. We've learned a lot about permitting processes, how to make sure they are fit for purpose, but we need to do more to make sure that we don't slow projects up unnecessarily, but of course, scrutinise them properly, because that's a really important part of the process. And projects are always complaining that business models are not, this is the way the project's funding, but there are still some gaps in them, so that some projects still have some uncertainties of how they will move forward. And that needs to be addressed. And then we need to focus on how do we collaborate much more effectively. So we started that process. Projects have had you know, small experiences of how will they actually collaborate with other projects. But now that they're moving into construction and operation, this is where we really need to get this right, share what we know. Everybody needs to succeed. It's no good if we have one successful project and another unsuccessful project. They all need to go forward together. So I think that as projects develop and continue their efforts and other people learn from what they are doing, then the impacts of this programme can only multiply. But we have to be intentionally making sure that we maximise the benefits from the programmes. There is no reason why we should not accrue all the benefits that we expected to achieve for ourselves. And so I think, although there is still a lot of uncertainty and a lot of challenges to navigate, we now have a really clear picture of the sorts of things that need to be done. And of course, the opportunity that is at stake if we don't get this right. And so thank you to all of you for the efforts that you are putting into this area. And I think, you know, as we collectively build on this foundation, then I expect that we will see, you know, a firm foundation for decarbonisation in the UK. So thank you very much.
Now, are you okay to take any questions?
Yes, of course.
Any quick questions? I've got one actually, which is maybe a little bit unfair. What about the bits in between the clusters? Do you see CCS applying to those? And did you get many questions about that while you were doing the clusters?
Yes, I think it's inevitable when you've got funding for a programme. The only thing people say about it is, why aren't you funding this other thing that's all the decarbonisation that isn't in clusters? So there is a really excellent government programme underway on developing what's called local industrial decarbonisation plans, which allows smaller communities to come together to look at how they would decarbonise. We hadn't expected that many of these regions would be looking at CCS, but as it's turned out, quite a lot of them are really keen and see that their ability to connect to a fairly nearby industrial cluster is going to be crucial for their decarbonisation success.
Yeah, can you speak up? Sorry.
Yeah, in that question.
Hang on, we've got a microphone. Sorry, just one moment, please. Yeah, if you introduce yourself and then speak into the microphone.
Yes, my name. Thank you. I'm called Gregory from University of Bradford, and also have a background in the industry. So if we look at the way, you know, various CCS projects are happening in Europe, in particular Norway and Holland, you know, we see that they're sort of far, you know, in advanced stage of implementation and also rolling out various projects, you know, across Europe. But in UK, we seem to be lagging behind. Is there any major reasons, or it is as you were explaining?
I wouldn't say that we are lagging behind, and I hope by the end of this conference you'll see a lot of the really exciting stuff that's going on. I think we set out a plan for decarbonised industry and decarbonised power, and we're on track with delivering that plan. I feel very confident of that. Everything isn't going to be done by 2025, but the plan is to decarbonise by 2040 and 2050, and I think the plans are pretty robust personally, but I hope you feel that at the end of the conference.
Okay, another question.
Hi, I'm Kumar Pachikola, Professor of Decarbonization of Industrial Cluster at Tees Valley region. My question is, rather than reinventing the wheels at individual clusters, what is your view of interactions with these clusters and make it as a more sustainable solution?
Yes, I think making sure the clusters continue to interact with each other in a sustainable way is absolutely crucial. The problem is that they're complex entities and they don't have any current funding. So I know they are very keen to get some small amount of central funding so that they can really set up some kind of community of clusters to share information. They have all done a great job because since our funding finished for that part of the programme in March 2023, they've all carried on for the last 2 years, setting up entities that allow them to get some income from business and things like that so they can run meetings. But it does need more of a push to make sure that they learn from each other because, as you so rightly say, you know, there is no point all reinventing the wheel. We can learn from each other.
So if you don't mind, what is that push?
What is the push?
Push to do that action.
Yeah, I think the push is that we're seeing increasingly that these bodies are starting to be seen as important by the local authorities, by government people. We're seeing that the NESO organisation that's developed the power network, they are interacting with people in these clusters because they see them as a group of people who are all engaged in this story. And crucially, they all understand that just if one industry gets what it wants, that doesn't help us much, that we need to collaborate and think about how the whole region's infrastructure needs to move forward to benefit the whole community, I think.
Okay. We'll just take one very quick question there, if we can. Oh. Oh dear, okay. Quick. If you don't mind, you two.
Stuart Hazeldine from Edinburgh Uni. I'm interested that one of our national political parties seems to have convinced itself that this is impossible by 2050. Do you think that's worth bothering about, or will they just sink into a morass?
I should no comment in a politician's way, shouldn't I think this is doable, and I think, you know, increasingly lots of people are seeing the value of doing this. So I hope, yes.
Okay, Matthew, last one.
Yeah, Mathieu Lucchio, UKCRC and University of Sheffield. If you're given another £200 million today, what would you do next? What would be your program?
That's a very interesting question. I kind of almost don't know the answer because one of the things I set out to do when delivering this program was to make sure it ended, and that when it finished, we all stopped and we all moved off onto something else. And the reason for that was the history of failed programs in the UK and the history of, you know, as Jeremy's alluded to, UKRI programs that never come to an end. You know, we couldn't afford that. We had to have this program delivering the engineering studies into the next phase and get on with it. So we didn't think about what we would do with the money. In reality, you know, the clusters and the projects that benefited from this money benefited a lot. And there's a lot of industries out there now that are getting excited about CCS, but haven't had that seed money. So I think the money could be definitely targeted and very well spent, but I wasn't advocating for that because the whole aim of the programme was we kick this off, we get these projects underway, they act as a beacon to others, the market exists and we go, you know, and that's, I think, still also a valid way of doing it.
I think you're just saying you want 22 billion, not 200 million. Is that right? Fair enough. Thank you very much, Bryony. That's great.